Good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Alba Kecha, the Portfolio Manager for Risk and Management at PECB. I'm delighted to welcome you all in a topic of initiating IT governance strategy to identify business needs. Implementation of IT governance, or indeed any IT best practice, should be consistent with organization's management style and the way organization deals with risk management and delivery of IT value. The biggest risk and concern to top management today is failing to align IT to real business needs, therefore implementing IT governance based on best practices is needed. The speaker of today's webinar is Mr. Rohit Banerjee, with more than 14 years of experience overall, with 10 years in IT hands-on progressive experience across program, project and team management, leading full SDLC lifecycle for complex, cross-functional, multi-site initiatives. We'll turn the time to Rohit now. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the session.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar, and I really want to thank for all your time and interest to join this webinar. We'll try to keep it as interactive as possible, and we'll also have a question and answer section at the end of the presentation. So let's start with today's session. One of the agenda points that I would like to start off with is the specific requirement or specification of what is governance and why do we need governance in particular. We will also talk about IT governance as an introduction. We'll also look at some of the ISO standards that are available for IT governance. We're also going to look at IT governance from the ISO perspective. We'll look at business needs that are in fact applicable for talking about governance of IT. And of course, we're going to look at the considerations that we look at while the governing body has to identify the business needs. Next, we're going to look at the business performance and conformance needs and how to identify them. We're also going to look at something called the EDM cycle for the IT governance. Along with that, we're going to look at some of the other best practices in IT and how they overlap between each other and what is the hierarchy like. After that, we're going to look at what are the business risks and how they impact the changing landscape of IT and how that in fact impact the business in return. We're also going to look at some of the common roadblocks, certain challenges faced, and what were the lessons learned. And we're going to have, like I said, a session for question and answer after that. So, what exactly is governance? And this was one of the questions that I had personally faced when I was speaking to a large audience of stakeholders, because everyone has a very different idea or a concept about what governance really means. So the term governance comes from the Greek word gouverno, which means to steer. Basically what governance means is whether you have a steering body and whether you have the mechanisms implemented in place to direct and steer the overall functioning of any organization. So what governance actually means is establishing policies, having proper implementation of a continuous monitoring mechanism of those policies. It has to have a governing body for that organization, which that member of that governing body has to do the continuous monitoring. And of course, it also includes the mechanisms that are required to ensure that the powers are balanced between the members of that governing body, so as to ensure there's accountability, and of course it ensures the enhancement of prosperity and viability of that organization so that it can sustain and survive in the long run. In simple words, the term governance means that the processes that coordinate and control the organization's resources and actions are in place. So, why do we need governance? Any organization, whether it's small, whether it's large, whether it's for profit, whether it's not for profit, has two very clear things. First is the performance, the business goals, what it stands to do, why does it survive to do, what is the intent of that organization to survive in this world. The second thing is conformance, meaning what are the legal requirements for that organization to exist, whether there are any industry standards, environmental regulations, or things of that sort. So any organization has to not only look at the performance part, but also look at the conformance part of it. When we're dealing with the performance and conformance, usually the governing body is faced with 4 questions. The first of them is, are we doing the right things? Second of all is, are we doing them the right way? The third is, are we getting them done well? And the final question is, are we actually getting the benefits? So when we address the first question, we're actually addressing the strategic aspect of the performance and conformance need for IT governance. When we address the second question, we are actually looking at the architectural aspects of the organization. When we address the third question, we're actually looking at the delivery system of how the system is actually delivering the services that is intended, and whether there's any wastage, whether there's any optimization possible or not. And finally, when we're addressing the final question, we're looking at the value that is created by that specific organization. Now, all these things has been defined by Fujitsu and a gentleman named John Thorpe for these 4 questions that is very, very crucial when we're talking about identifying the business needs when we are initiating an IT governance strategy. So far, we have only been discussing about governance in general. Let's take a look at what it means for IT governance specifically. There are certain other institutes and organizations that research into IT governance. One such institute is the IT Governance Institute, located in United States. ITGI defines IT governance as the responsibility of the executives, the board of directors, and it consists of components such as leadership of any organization, the organization structures that has been put into place, as well as the processes that has been implemented so that the organization's IT function or the organization's IT capabilities sustains and extends the organization's goals, organization's strategies, organization's objectives. So the IT has to sustain and extend the business goals and not the other way around. Gartner, another popular organization, defines IT governance as the processes that are there to ensure the effective as well as the efficient use of IT to ensure that the organization achieves its goals. In simple words, what it actually means is that any kind of IT operations or IT projects should be aligned with the organization's strategy. Moving on, we'll look at what are the available standards that we can refer for IT governance from the International Standards Organization. One of the very popular one is the ISO/IEC 38500, which was recently updated in 2015, which sets the standard for the governance of IT for any kind of organization. Other supplemental standards that are available include the 38501, which is the implementation guide for governance of IT, the 38502, which was updated on 2014, which talks a little bit more about the framework and the model, and lastly the 38504, which was recently released this year, which talks about the guidance for the principles that are based in the governance of enterprise IT. So what does ISO say about IT governance? Let's take a look from the ISO perspective. There are several points that are mentioned in the standards that we just saw. Just the key points to take away from them is IT governance actually provides the guiding principles for the members of those governing bodies to ensure that effective and efficient and acceptable use of IT is there within their organization. Of course, it applies to the governance of organization for any current as well as future use of IT, including the processes meant for management and any decisions also related to the current as well as the future use of IT. It defines the governance as actually a subset of the organizational governance or corporate governance, and it's just a domain that is a level below the corporate governance. IT governance, like we saw in the last slide, is applicable for any and all organization, whether it's a public company, whether it's a private company, whether it's a government organization, whether it's a profit commercial organization, not-profit organization, it applies to all. Whether it's a single person setup or it's a multinational cross geographic countries and regions, doesn't matter. Also, it is applicable to all kinds of organization irrespective of how much they're using IT. So some of the companies may argue that we don't use IT that much in our organization. Well, even if you use a little bit of IT, IT governance becomes applicable for that organization. Of course, it assures the stakeholders to have confidence in the organization's governance of IT, and most importantly, it sets a vocabulary, a common term used for the governance of IT. Usually the business people may not be well versed with the technical jargons, vocabulary used by the IT team, or the IT department or the IT functions may not be well versed with the business jargons that the business people may use. So IT governance sets out to establish a common vocabulary for governance of IT to be used both by business as well as IT. So what are the business needs for the governance of IT? So far, as of now, many successful organizations has recognized that the board and the executives need to consider IT and embrace IT as any other significant part of their organization while they're doing business. Of course, the board believes that both the business and IT functions must work together. They must collaborate with each other so that IT is also included in the governance and management approach while taking important business decisions. Governance and management of such enterprise IT actually helps create the optimal value for its stakeholder. To do this, it's important to maintain a balance between three things: benefit realization, optimizing of risks, and optimizing the resources that are required. Some of the considerations that we need to keep in mind when we are thinking from the governing body side to identify the business needs are the four questions that we looked before. Are we doing the right things? Are we doing them the right way? Are we getting them done well? Are we getting the benefits? When we're looking at the strategy part, we're looking whether the IT initiatives are in line with the vision of the organization, whether it is consistent with the business principles, whether the IT is actually contributing to the strategic objectives of that organization, and whether it's actually providing optimal value at an affordable cost and an acceptable level of risk. When we're looking at the second part of architecture, we're looking whether IT is in line with the existing infrastructure and architecture of the organization, whether the IT is consistent with the existing architectural principles of the organization, and if IT is actually able to contribute to the existing gamut or assets of the enterprise or the organization, and whether the IT is in line with other initiatives that already may be in place and whether they're not in conflict with each other. The third part that we're looking at is the delivery, whether IT is effective and there's a discipline management in place so that the delivery and change management processes are effective and efficient. Whether there are competent and technical resources and business resources are available so that the required capabilities can be delivered and the organizational changes can be implemented that leverage such kind of capabilities. The fourth part of value needs to ensure that IT as well as business has a clear understanding and a shared understanding of what are the expected benefits from the stakeholders. There's a clear accountability that has been established for who would be realizing the benefits, who would the benefits be for, so on and so forth. Of course, there should be some kind of relevant metrics to measure the progress and to monitor the progress as well. And of course, there should be an effective business realization process over the entire economic life cycle of that particular investment or that initiative. So when we are coming down to identifying the business needs, basically any organization that you look at either would have some kind of a pain point or there would be some stimuli or a trigger event that would require certain things that need to be taken up, that needs to be addressed. While looking at pain points, some of the most common pain points of any organization globally are business being frustrated with failed IT initiatives, IT costs rising every year, and a general perception of very low business value from the IT. Of course, there's always a significant amount of incidents related to IT affecting the business risks. Sometimes many of the organizations look at outsourcing service delivery and service levels. Usually that's where customers are affected, and these problems, when they grow in numbers, create a problem and they become a pain point for that organization. There could be several industry or legal requirements or contractual requirements that IT is sometimes not able to fulfill, because of which the business has to suffer. Of course, IT's limitation could also be one of the pain points where it's not able to demonstrate innovation in terms of capabilities or in terms of addressing the agility of business if there's a change in the market or the economy. Then again, we have some audit reports provided either internally or externally which may show the IT in poor light in terms of its performance or its quality audits. One of the major pain areas that any organization faces from the business side are hidden or rogue IT spending, wherein the business might have planned for a budget and suddenly some server or some infrastructure fails, which requires an out-of-budget requirement, financial requirement or resource requirement to be put in to fix that. And that creates a sense of mistrust between the IT and the business people. Of course, when there's not a solid communication mechanism, there's always a risk of duplication or overlaps between different initiatives, and resources such as manpower, staff, finance are wasted in that process. Insufficient IT resources is a pet peeve of, I'm sure, any of the IT department, and one of the major concerns is that there's not adequate skilled resources available, because of which the people who are actually doing the work either get a big load of work to do, and that's the reason why they are dissatisfied, burned out, and that's the reason why many of the companies now see that there's a high rate of attrition and turnover every year. Of course, many times the business needs or the business requirements may not be completely understood by the IT, thereby failing to meet the business needs, or simply they are delivered late because of the misunderstanding, or they're usually over budget than what was planned. Since IT has several components to be considered, there are multiple IT assurance efforts that are in place, and sometimes the interaction between these efforts and initiatives can be quite complex and mind-boggling. This is also one of the pain areas where the business feels that they're not able to understand what's actually going on. Of course, these tend to create the reluctance and non-committal from the board members in order to support IT or even sponsor some of the most needed IT initiatives. Complex IT operating models sometimes deter business to going into them, saying that let's keep it simple and let's work out things that way. Looking at the trigger events, it could be a merger of a company with another one, or it could be an acquisition or a divestiture, or simply a corporate restructuring that triggers the requirement for a new IT governance strategy. It could also be a shift in the market or the economy or the competitive position of that particular organization, whether locally, regionally, or globally. It could also be change in business operating models or outsourcing or sourcing arrangements. We've seen that in the last decade, China has come across as one of the leading countries in technology and production. Taking India as an example, for past 1 or 2 decades has been one of the leaders when it comes to service industry. And that is the reason why many of the Western countries have been depending on India and China and changing their sourcing arrangements or their business operating models to accommodate such changing market trends, or just simply making them more business viable. There could also be new laws and legislations put into place that may require a new IT governance strategy specifically for the business need. Or it could be simply a very significant technology change or paradigm shift in the market that requires the organization to move in that particular direction. We have smart cars to talk about, we have wearable technologies, we have Internet of Things, we have big data. So we see that a lot of technology change are actually requiring or mandating any other organizations to actually catch up with their competitors. Or it could simply be just a specific focus given for a governance project at an enterprise-wide level. These usually come into place where there's a new appointment or a recent appointment of a new CEO who may have a different vision for the company, a CIO who may have a different strategy for IT, or any other C-suite or C-level executives who may have just recently joined and want to ensure that they are able to lead with their vision. Of course, any organization would have their clients also auditing them externally. So in certain cases, the external audits or the compliance requirements or assessments done by third-party consultants also show that there is a need to change, or there's a need to ensure that the IT strategy, IT governance strategy is revisited. It could be just a business strategy or a priority for that organization to start with a new thing. Let's say Apple, Google went into smart cars. So Apple decided, okay, we also need to go into smart cars and evaluate and just test the waters to see if that particular business is viable or not. It could also be something internal, something intrinsic, that the organization itself wants to improve the value that they need to get out of IT. And it could be the internal stakeholders or external stakeholders that want to actually see IT contributing to the organization in terms of value. So, going quickly through the performance needs of business for IT, a couple of things that the ISO standards clarifies is if there are any proposals that addresses the normal operation continuing or any risks that are related to IT usage, they should be reviewed so that the IT can be assured to support the processes required for the business for its capability and capacity. In terms of performance for continued business operations, any risks that are arising from the IT activities also needs to be evaluated regularly. Any risks that are related to the integrity of information or any IT assets, even it could be the intellectual property, should be reviewed. Any options for effective or timely decisions for the use of IT that is in support of the business goals should be reviewed regularly by the governing body. Evaluation if the effectiveness of the performance for the organization's system for the IT governance should be done regularly by the governing body members. Of course, the governing body has to ensure that sufficient resources are actually allocated to the IT so that it can meet the needs of the organization based on the business priorities, the budgetary constraints that has been put forth by the business. It also has to ensure that the IT is indeed supporting the business with the most up-to-date and accurate data, and IT is protected from any loss of data or information or any misuse of the same. Whether the allocated resources and budget for IT are actually prioritized based on the business objectives. Whether the policies for data accuracy, any legal compliance, and efficient use of IT are actually being properly followed or not also should be reviewed and monitored regularly. Coming to the conformance need of business for IT, we look at regulatory, legislative, legal or contractual obligations. It could be internal policies, whether these guidelines and standards are being followed and satisfied by IT or not. Whether there are routine and regular mechanisms that are put into place to check if the IT usage is compliant with these regulations. Certain policies have been put into place and enforced to ensure that it meets internal obligations for how the IT is being used. The IT staff is developed and skilled enough, and they adhere certain professional behavior when it comes to IT's utilization, and ensuring that all actions relating to IT are actually ethical in nature. Of course, ensuring the timely and comprehensive reviews for any audit reporting or audit practice that is appropriate is to the satisfaction of the business owners and other stakeholders involved. All these IT activities must be monitored to ensure that the relevant obligations or contractual regulatory requirements are met every time. Let's take a look at the EDM cycle. We talked about a lot of evaluation, setting direction, enforcing, monitoring and reviewing. The EDM, or the Evaluate, Direct and Monitor cycle, has been defined by the ISO 38500 as a very effective model to ensure any corporate governance of IT for any organization. So typically, any organization has to be subject to the business pressures and the business needs in their surrounding environment. These things need to be evaluated by the governing body, based on which they may present or direct certain plans to the business processes or the management of that organization. They may set certain policies to be defined, and these plans and policies take shape in terms of IT or ICT projects being implemented in that particular organization. Now, from the performance of the IT projects, there may be certain changes that may be required. Some projects may succeed, some projects may fail, and such information could be in terms of a proposal given back from the management or the business processes back to the governing body to be evaluated and given further instructions and directions to proceed. Let's say the project actually succeeds in its initiatives. Then these projects in fact transform into the business as usual or IT operations within that organization. Once it's in business as usual mode, these operations have to be monitored continuously, not only by the business or the management part, but also from the governing body part, and this in turn plays a vital role in evaluating what needs to be done next. Now, I know that the slide that I'm showing right now shows the 2008 version of the figure. The ISO 38500 2015 version has certain modifications in terms of what is called as the business processes. They have removed the idea of ICT projects and operations, and I've just simplified it saying that management systems utilization of IT. And they have changed some of the terms for the existing external things such as stakeholders' needs and so on and so forth. But generally, this is the EDM cycle for IT governance. Next, we're going to look at what are the other available best practices in IT. Certainly, it's not possible only to have the IT governance in place in isolation. It has to be supported by a number of other best practices or standards or other frameworks, legislations. So we're looking at drivers that drive that, which further encourages or needs certain enterprise governance or corporate governance needs, which further fuels or drops down into the IT governance needs, and these in turn rely on the best practice standards, which then define the processes and procedures. To give just an example, for any organization, like we've already seen, we look at the performance, which is basically the business goals, and the conformance, which is basically the legal part. I'm sure most of you might have already been aware of Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which is commonly known as SOX. Or for any banking folks out there, I'm sure you are already aware of Basel II and Basel III. So these kind of drivers actually drive down or drill down to the corporate governance requirement. For the performance part, we look at something called as the balance scorecard. And for the conformance part, we have something called as COSO. From COSO and balance scorecard, we have a combined usage of the ISO 38500 as the standard and COBIT 5 as one of the framework which is available from another international body called as ISACA. These define the IT governance framework and IT governance standard, which is again relying on further down-level standards for quality management, such as ISO 9000, information security management, such as ISO 27001, or IT service management, such as ISO 20000. Now, these standards further define the actual processes and procedures that needs to be at the line level, which may include quality assurance procedures and processes, security principles that needs to be implemented in any organization, or certain processes defined as per ITIL version 3 2011. Now, though they may be defined in a hierarchy, often there are many areas that are overlapping even between these different standards and different best practices. To just give a demonstration of such, we have the top level evaluate, direct, monitor from the IT governance perspective, and then we have the entire domain of IT management perspective, which requires aligning, planning, and organizing the IT initiatives, building or acquiring systems and implementing them in your organization. Once implemented, delivering, servicing and supporting the IT systems, and of course from the management side, monitoring, evaluating and assessing them and giving the feedback back to the governing body. ISO 38500 directly sits on the top, with ISO 31000 coming from the risk management side, which overlaps with that. We have something called as the TOGAF, which is a framework for enterprise architecture. We see that information security becomes a very important role, overlapping quite a lot of domains when it comes to not only monitoring but planning, building, as well as service and support. To ensure these are built as per the service delivery, we look at ITIL and ISO 20000 playing a big role in planning, building, and definitely in delivering, servicing, and supporting. Now, when we're talking about initiatives, we need project management, which could be either supported by a very well-known standard or a framework called as PRINCE2, or PMBOK from the Project Management Institute. Now, to ensure that the software and the hardware components are actually tuned to support these services, we have something called as the CMMI from Carnegie Mellon Institute that takes care of the software development or software service or software acquisition of such systems. Going forward, understanding how these overlaps, we're now going to look at how risks are subjected to business organizations across the world. Forbes has created top 10 global risks for business for 2015. Some of them are directly related to the corporate governance and the business side of it. But if you look at the 9th point, which directly states cyber risk, which includes computer crime, hacking, malware, or malicious code. Now, this is a direct risk to the business. But apart from that, there are several indirect risks that have been highlighted over here. Part of them belongs to business interruption, which is addressed by business continuity management or disaster recovery. And of course, the requirement to innovate and meet customers' needs also becomes a part of IT governance scope. How is the changing landscape impacting the business in terms of IT? So there are top 10 emerging digital technology trends that include big data, mobile devices, cloud service, machine learning, IoT or Internet of Things, e-learning, social media, digital business models, cybersecurity, and digital currencies such as bitcoins. Now, these are the things that are here to stay. Conversely, where you have good things, you always will have certain bad things that would affect the advantages gained from that. So the top 10 cybersecurity threat trends for 2015-16 includes, most importantly, ransomware. I'm sure some of you at some point in time either have experienced it yourself or has heard someone being affected by that ransomware. It's the popular topic for the season. Apart from that, we have also seen some hardware-centric cyber attacks coming into the picture, and of course, smartphone being available for the masses as well. There are several malwares specifically developed for these smartphones. We had recent issues with browser-based flash vulnerabilities coming into the picture, as well as cloud service-based concerns. Phishing attacks, social engineering, along with identity thefts have also started gaining its foothold in terms of cybersecurity threat. And we've also seen a lot of people report hacktivism movements targeted specifically to healthcare and retail. We were talking about Google going into car, Apple also announcing at one point in time that they want to go, but that also includes risks that are available with connected cars, and one of the major car companies in fact was subject to one of the threats very recently. And finally, we see the rise of nation-state sponsored attacks and APTs, advanced persistent threats, that are also coming into the play in this current situation. How these affect the business is up to the extent of IT being used by that business, but definitely any business will be impacted, and the business needs to identify its needs in order to ensure that these things are part of their IT governance strategy. So when we go on to the common roadblocks and challenges when we are defining the IT governance strategy, we come across several of the known things. One of the first and foremost important factor is the human factor. And this is where whenever we're talking about changes, there's always the initial inertia or the resistance to change that becomes a very problematic area. Of course, there's a general lack of awareness and sometimes even inaccurate information about what IT governance or governance means in general. Of course, since IT governance is on a long-term basis, it becomes very difficult in proving short-term tangible values and benefits to be demonstrated to the stakeholders or to the business. Inadequate training related to governance and IT governance is also one of the common challenges faced by organizations. So what are the lessons that we have learned so far? Governance of IT is actually quite vast. We just had a very, very bird's eye view of the overall gamut of governance. A person or an organization can go as deep as they want, but it's better to start with some easy or small processes so that you can show it as a quick win. These would help get sustained support from the business executives and acceptance by other stakeholders. Since there's always the sense of urgency that changes or enables the change of people who are resistant to change, sound the wake-up call. This is very integral to get the ball rolling and getting things into motion. Of course, one of the best ways to actually formalize the governance of IT initiative is to establish an IT executive strategy committee or a steering committee. This group will actually take forward and champion the IT governance in any organization and actually take care of the governance and governing body's requirements. Lastly, Patience is always a virtue and perseverance always pays. For anyone who is interested in the ISO IEC 38500 training courses, PECB offers several courses ranging from one-day course for introduction to foundation courses and lead and governance manager courses that are full-fledged. You can get in the details for all these exam and certification courses at the web links mentioned below. That's all from my side. Thank you so much. I know I have just crossed the limit of time, but I'm open for any question and answers if someone has them. Any questions out there?
Thank you, Rohit, for a great and a very informative webinar. As you already mentioned, I want to inform you that PCB provides for training and certification services for ISO 38500 Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, and Lead Auditor. The exam and certification fees are included in the training price, and participation certificate of CPDs will be issued to participants. If you are interested in more details or in scheduling any of these trainings, you can find the link I've just sent you on the chat box. However, if you have any questions, please feel free to send an email at portfolio.marketing@pcb.com. Now we're going to answer some of the questions. The first question is, what are the parameters that can be used to monitor IT governance performance, and how it will impact and be integrated on organizations' KPIs?
Right. That's a very good question. There are several parameters based on what is the need. Now, we discussed about the pain points, the pain areas, and the trigger events. Each of the situations, each of the points that we have discussed has a very separate parameter to be looked into. For example, we saw that the service delivery and the service level problems were one of the most important points. So this depends and is different from organization to organization on their specific needs, and the organization can specify and prioritize to solving one or maybe one or two problem areas at once. Based on that, each of the parameters can be defined based on that specific problem. So let's say it's a service delivery problem, service level problem. The parameters could include the service level agreements to be revised, monitoring of the service level agreement internally, any operating level agreement internally, or third-party service providers can be implemented, and these parameters then can be directly tied with the KPI that can be included in the board of directors or the governing body's dashboard to be monitored.
Thank you for answering the question. We have another question here. It says there is a big overlap with COVID-5. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Now, this is a slightly a topic that would create more questions than answer, but just to keep it simple, 38,500 standard talks about the requirements of the governing body, what they are supposed to do. So that's the reason why it's a standard. COVID-5 is more of a framework that says, okay, if this is required, that is what to be done. These are the things how you can do it. This is the framework or the connection of this requirement to the lower level standards or lower level frameworks. So think of it as, I was actually reading up someone's blog the other day. So think of 38,500 as the roof, COVID-5 as the wall of a house, and the underlying processes, standards as the foundation of that house. That's how it connects. So of course there will be overlaps, but they are complementary to each other.
Thank you very much for the answer. Because of the time limitation, we will respond now to the last question. It says, what are the biggest mistakes that companies make when it comes to governance?
That's a fantastic question. One of the biggest mistake that the company does, like I was trying to explain in the first question, was they try to take up all of the problems at the first go, and that's never the way. You have to take one process at a time, maybe two processes, maybe one pain point or two pain points at a time, and focus on that. The certain other organizations think that they can do everything at once. That doesn't happen in real life. Take one, start small, get it done, then look at the next level or the next pain point. That is one of the biggest problems and the biggest challenges that the organizations commit mistake while going into IT governance.
Thank you, sir, for all your answers. And thanks to everyone who attended this webinar. We appreciate you being here. I want to inform you that this webinar is also recorded and can be found in our website and YouTube channel. We will also send you the link of the webinar in your email in the upcoming days. Don't forget to check back on our upcoming webinars and topics of your interest by visiting our website, pcb.com. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time, same day at the same time. Thank you, Rohit, again for a very interesting webinar.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.